The snowstorm was merciless that morning when Officer Mark Jensen received a call about animal sounds near an abandoned road. He expected to find nothing, maybe a stray or two, but when he reached the frozen trail, his heart stopped. Tied to a wooden post half buried in snow was a German shepherd, her body trembling, her eyes full of pain. And around her, tiny, motionless puppies. The mother's paw was bleeding, the rope cutting deep into her fur. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for them. What Mark discovered next that day would break him and the entire world into tears. Stay with us. This story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The wind screamed across the empty highway like a wounded animal. Snowflakes whipped against the windshield of Officer Mark Jensen's patrol car, blurring his view of the road ahead. He had been patrolling for hours, the tires crunching over fresh layers of snow, when his radio crackled to life, a faint, static-filled voice from dispatch. Unit 47, we've got a report of animal cries near the old Pine Ridge Trail, the voice said. Caller didn't give details, just said it sounded urgent. Mark frowned. In weather like this, most people stayed inside. The Pine Ridge area was remote, abandoned cabins, icy roads, and nothing but dense forest. He considered ignoring the call. Maybe it was a coyote or just the wind howling through the trees, but something in his gut told him otherwise. He adjusted his gloves, turned the wheel, and headed toward the trail. The snow thickened as he drove deeper into the woods. The patrol car's headlights carved narrow tunnels through the swirling white, revealing nothing but endless snowbanks. Every few seconds he thought he heard it, a distant muffled sound almost like a whimper. He slowed down, listening. Could just be my mind playing tricks, he muttered. But his instincts, the same instincts that had saved lives before, wouldn't let him turn back. He parked near the edge of the road, stepped out into the freezing wind, and instantly felt the sting of cold on his face. Pulling his flashlight from his belt, he scanned the area. "Hello, anyone there?" he called out. Only the moaning wind answered. Then, faintly, he heard it again. A weak, heart-wrenching cry that pierced through the storm. It wasn't the cry of a wild animal. It was softer, desperate. Mark's pulse quickened. He trudged through the knee-deep snow, following the sound until his light landed on something ahead. A wooden post, half buried in snow. And beside it, movement. He stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. What he saw made his heart stop cold. Mark's flashlight trembled slightly in his hand as he stepped closer to the wooden post. The beam cut through the snow, and for a moment he thought his eyes were deceiving him. But then reality struck, and it hit like a punch to the chest. A German shepherd was tied to the post, her thick fur matted with ice, her body trembling violently. The rope around her torso was so tight it had cut into her skin, leaving raw wounds now frozen with streaks of blood. Her eyes, dark, pleading, full of pain, met his. She didn't bark, didn't growl. She just stared, as if she had been waiting for someone to come. Mark's heart twisted. "Oh my God," he whispered, kneeling down. He could see her sides heaving, her breath forming weak clouds in the freezing air. Then, as he moved his light downward, he froze again. Scattered around her were tiny shapes, puppies. 4 of them. Small, fragile, their fur dusted with snow. One twitched faintly. The others lay frighteningly still. His throat tightened as he realized they weren't just cold. They were barely alive. The mother whimpered softly, inching forward as much as the rope would allow, trying to nudge her pups closer to her belly. But the rope pulled her back each time. She cried out in frustration and pain, a sound that cut through the blizzard like a knife. Mark dropped to his knees. "Easy, girl. Easy," he said softly, his voice trembling. He reached for his pocket knife and began sawing at the rope. His fingers were numb, but he didn't stop. "Who could do this?" he muttered under his breath. "Who would leave her like this?" When the rope finally snapped, the dog staggered forward, collapsing beside her puppies. She licked one of them weakly, whining as if begging it to wake up. Mark felt his vision blur, not from the snow but from tears. He shrugged off his jacket, wrapping it around the mother and scooping the tiny bodies into his arms. Their fur was stiff with cold, their breath shallow and uneven. "Hang in there, little ones," he whispered. "Hang in there." As he cradled them against his chest, The mother lifted her head and met his gaze again, and in that moment, Mark silently promised he wouldn't let them die out there. Mark crouched beside the trembling German shepherd, his breath forming clouds in the icy air. The mother dog's chest rose and fell unevenly, her eyes darting between him and the fragile bundles lying motionless in the snow. She let out a soft, broken whine, not of fear but of pleading. It was the sound of a mother begging for help when words could not exist. Mark carefully removed his gloves, extending a hand. "Hey, it's okay, girl. I'm here," he whispered. She hesitated, her body tense, but when one of her puppies whimpered faintly, she turned her head toward them and gave a weak lick. That was enough. Mark knew she trusted him, or maybe she had no choice left but to hope. He gently tucked the puppies deeper into his jacket, feeling their tiny bodies twitch weakly. Their fur was icy against his skin. The mother inched closer, pressing her nose against his sleeve, whimpering again as though making sure her babies were safe. Her paw, the one that had been bleeding, had trembled as she tried to drag herself forward. Mark's throat tightened. "Easy, girl. I've got them," he said, trying to steady his voice. He looked around the snowy field, searching for signs of who could have done this. Tire marks, footprints, anything. Nothing. Just endless white. Whoever tied her here had meant for her to die. The mother suddenly let out a sharp bark, weak, hoarse, but full of urgency. Mark looked down in alarm. One of the smallest puppies had stopped moving. He placed 2 fingers gently against its chest, no heartbeat. His mind raced. "No, no, no," he murmured, rubbing the pup gently, trying to bring warmth back. The mother whimpered louder, pressing her nose against the lifeless pup. The sound that escaped her broke Mark completely. He had seen crime scenes, wrecks, and tragedies, but never this kind of pain. In that frozen moment, he swore he would not let her lose another. Mark's fingers shook as he wrapped the last puppy in a fleece blanket from the trunk of his patrol car. The wind was biting harder now, cutting through his uniform as the storm thickened around them. The mother dog, exhausted but still alert, lay against the seat, her eyes darting from one pup to another as if counting them over and over. Her body trembled uncontrollably, but she refused to rest until she was sure they were safe. Mark reached into the back seat, adjusting the heater to full blast. "Come on, little ones. Stay with me," he whispered. The puppies were still cold, their breathing faint. He gently rubbed each tiny body between his palms, trying to stir warmth back into them. One of them let out a weak cry, a fragile, beautiful sound that made him exhale in relief, but one remained silent. The smallest one. Its tiny chest didn't rise. Mark's pulse spiked. "No, no." "Not you two," he muttered, gently laying the pup across his hand. He pressed his fingers against its ribs. No movement. Desperation took over. He cupped the puppy's body and breathed softly into its muzzle. 1, 2, 3 breaths, then rubbed its chest again. "Come on, little fighter. Come on." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a faint twitch, followed by a weak, gasping breath. Mark froze, eyes widening in disbelief. The pup coughed softly, its tiny body shivering. "That's it. That's it," he whispered, smiling through tears he hadn't realized were falling. The mother whimpered from the seat, her tail giving the slightest wag, as if she understood what had just happened. Mark tucked the revived pup under her chin, and she immediately began licking it, whining softly with gratitude. Snow pounded against the windshield, the world outside reduced to white chaos. Mark started the engine and grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47, he said, voice shaking. "I've got an emergency. Injured dog and 4 puppies. They need medical attention now." Static crackled before a reply came through. "Copy that, 47. Closest animal clinic is 20 minutes out. Roads are icy. Proceed with caution." Mark's jaw tightened. He glanced at the German shepherd, now curled protectively around her pups. "Hold on," he whispered. "We're not losing anyone today." Then he hit the sirens and drove into the storm. The patrol car roared down the snow-covered road, its red and blue lights flashing faintly through the storm. The wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear as ice built up along the edges. Mark leaned forward, squinting through the blur, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Every second mattered now. The puppies were barely hanging on, and the mother's breathing was shallow and uneven. "Come on, just a little longer," he muttered under his breath, glancing at the rearview mirror. In the back seat, the German shepherd lay curled around her pups, her head resting protectively over them. Her eyes were half closed, but every few moments she stirred to check each tiny body. Her maternal instinct refused to fade, even as her strength did. Mark turned up the heater again, feeling sweat bead under his uniform despite the freezing cold outside. The road was slick with ice and the tires skidded dangerously around corners. He gritted his teeth, heart pounding. The thought of losing them, after coming this far, was unbearable. A gust of wind slammed against the car, shaking it violently. "Hold on," he shouted instinctively, as if speaking to them could keep them alive. One of the puppies whimpered faintly and he exhaled, gripping the wheel tighter. He reached a stretch of road lined with dark pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. The headlights flickered as if struggling against the darkness itself. He kept his focus locked on the glowing hospital sign that flickered faintly in the distance, a beacon through the storm. "Almost there," he whispered, voice trembling. He looked back once more. The mother's eyes met his in the mirror, tired, trusting, and full of silent pleading. In that moment, Mark realized this wasn't just a rescue. It was a promise. He pressed his foot harder on the accelerator. "Hang in there, girl," he murmured. "I won't let you down." The snow howled louder outside, but inside that car, one man and one mother fought the storm, together, for the sake of life itself. The clinic doors burst open as Mark carried the bundled puppies in his arms, the mother limp against his chest. The warm air inside fogged his vision, and for a moment he could barely breathe. "Emergency," he shouted. "She's freezing, puppies too." Two veterinary nurses rushed forward, taking the puppies gently while a third brought a stretcher for the mother. The lead veterinarian, Dr. Harris, an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes, hurried in, instantly sensing the gravity of the situation. "Get blankets. Warm fluids now," he ordered. Mark stepped back, his uniform soaked from melted snow. He watched helplessly as they worked, wrapping the puppies in heated towels, checking pulses, and inserting IV lines into the mother's trembling body. The room filled with frantic movement, the steady hum of machines and the faint cries of life fighting against the cold. Dr. Harris leaned over the mother dog, running a hand over her ribs. "Severe frostbite on the paw. Deep rope burns. Dehydration," he murmured grimly. He lifted her eyelid gently. "Heart rate's weak, but she's fighting." He looked up at Mark. "You got here just in time, officer." 10 more minutes and they wouldn't have made it. Mark exhaled shakily, his chest heavy with relief and guilt all at once. "Who would do this to her?" he whispered. Dr. Harris shook his head, his eyes dark. "Someone who shouldn't have ever owned a soul like this." One of the nurses gasped softly. "Doc, look at this!" She pointed to the mother's neck where the collar had been. Beneath the dirt and dried blood was a faint scar, the imprint of something once engraved. Dr. Harris frowned. "There's a name here, but it's too worn to read." Mark stepped closer, heart pounding as he brushed the fur aside, revealing the faint letters beneath. His stomach twisted. This wasn't just any stray. This dog had once belonged to someone who might have been closer to him than he could imagine. Dr. Harris adjusted the examination light, focusing it on the faintly rusted metal tag hanging loosely from the dog's worn collar. The letters were nearly rubbed off, but Mark could still make out a few. He leaned closer, heart pounding as the light revealed the word, Canine Rexa. His breath caught in his throat. "Wait, that can't be," he whispered. Dr. Harris glanced up. "You recognize the name?" Mark swallowed hard. "Rexa. She was one of ours. A canine unit from the force. She served 2 years before being injured on duty. We thought she'd been retired and placed in a foster home." He paused, his voice cracking slightly. "She saved lives. She was a hero." The vet's face tightened with disbelief. "A police dog? You're telling me someone tied a trained canine in the snow to die with her puppies?" Mark couldn't speak. He just nodded slowly, staring at the dog lying weakly on the table, her sides barely moving. His mind raced back to old memories, reports of Rex's bravery, the day she located a missing child in a snowstorm much like this one, her loyalty to her handler, Officer Grant. After her injury, Grant had been reassigned, and Rexa disappeared from records. Until now. He looked down at her, pain and fury battling inside him. "You didn't deserve this, girl," he murmured. "After everything you did?" One of the nurses approached quietly. "She's stabilizing," she said softly. "She's tough." Mark managed a weak smile. "Yeah, She always was. Dr. Harris straightened, his tone grim. Whoever did this should be held accountable. I'll report it, but we both know this wasn't just neglect. This was betrayal, Mark nodded. His jaw clenched as he turned toward the window. Snow still fell outside, soft and relentless, blanketing the streets like a silent witness. He whispered to himself, "She served her country, and this is how they thanked her." The mother dog stirred faintly, her paw twitching as she nudged one of her puppies closer. Mark reached out, resting his hand gently on her head. "Don't worry, Rexa," he said quietly. "You're safe now. I'll make sure no one ever hurts you again." But deep down he knew this discovery had changed everything. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was redemption. Mark stepped outside the clinic, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The storm had finally calmed, but the silence felt heavier than ever. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the cold night air, glowing faintly under the streetlights. He leaned against his patrol car, exhaling deeply as the tension of the past few hours caught up to him. His hands were still trembling, and not from the cold but from everything he had just learned. Rexa. The name echoed in his mind. A hero once celebrated by the department, now left to die in the snow with her newborn pups. Mark closed his eyes, jaw tightening. "We were supposed to protect her," he whispered. "She protected us, and we failed her." The memory of her trembling body flashed in his mind. The way she had still tried to save her puppies despite the pain. The way her eyes had met his, full of trust and exhaustion. It broke something deep inside him. He wasn't just angry. He was ashamed. He pressed his palms against his face, struggling to hold back tears. For years, he had prided himself on staying strong, through crime scenes, rescues, disasters. But this was different. This was betrayal from within the uniform he wore every day. A sound drew his attention, the faint muffled bark of a dog from inside the clinic. He turned, seeing Rexa through the frosted window, her head weakly lifting as if searching for him. In that moment, all the heaviness melted into something else, determination. He straightened, brushing the snow off his shoulders. "You've done enough, girl," he murmured. "Now it's my turn." Inside, Rexa's puppies stirred under a heat lamp, tiny tails twitching, the faintest sign of life, of hope. Mark looked up at the sky, the snow falling gently around him, and whispered, "I promise. You'll never be alone again." That night, beneath the quiet snowfall, a bond was born. One not of duty, but of redemption. Morning sunlight poured softly through the clinic windows, casting golden streaks across the room. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm silence, the kind that comes after a night of survival. Mark stepped inside quietly, the scent of antiseptic and warm air greeting him. His eyes immediately went to the corner where a small enclosure had been set up, and his heart softened. Rexa was awake, weak but alive. Her head rested on a blanket, while 4 tiny puppies nestled against her belly, nursing peacefully. The faint rhythm of their breathing filled the room like music. She lifted her gaze when she saw him, her tired eyes flickering with recognition. Her tail gave a slow, soft wag. Mark knelt beside her, a gentle smile tugging at his lips. "Hey, girl," he whispered, reaching out to stroke her head. "Told you we'd make it." Her fur was warmer now, her pulse steady beneath his hand. He could feel life returning to her, a spark of strength pushing back against the memory of the snow. Dr. Harris entered quietly, watching the scene with a small smile. "They made it through the night," he said softly. "All 4 pups and strong little fighters. And their mom. She's tougher than anyone gave her credit for." Mark chuckled quietly. "That's Rexa for you." He stayed there for hours, helping feed the puppies, cleaning their bedding, and talking softly to Rexa. At one point, she pressed her nose into his palm, a faint, almost grateful sigh escaping her. For the first time, her eyes no longer held fear, only peace. As the sun climbed higher, the clinic filled with warmth and quiet joy. Mark felt something shift deep within him, the kind of healing that comes only when pain finds purpose. He looked down at Rexa and whispered, "You're safe now, Mama. You did your part. Let me do mine." Rexa blinked slowly, resting her head back down as her puppies nuzzled closer. Outside, the world glittered under new light, a morning of miracles, born from one man's promise and one mother's unbreakable love. 2 weeks later, The sky was clear and blue as Mark stood outside the clinic, his patrol car parked nearby. But this time he wasn't here on duty. He was here for something far more personal. The glass doors opened and out walked Dr. Harris, smiling warmly. "She's ready," he said. Mark's heart lifted as Rexa appeared beside him, her gait still slow but steady. Her fur had regained its shine, and her eyes, those same eyes that once held only fear, now gleamed with life. Behind her, 4 tiny puppies tumbled out, tails wagging, full of playful energy. "Looks like they remember you," Dr. Harris said with a grin. Rexa trotted forward, stopping just in front of Mark. She tilted her head, studying him for a long moment. Then, in a move that melted his heart, she pressed her muzzle gently into his chest, letting out a soft, grateful whine. Mark dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around her. "You're home now," he whispered, voice trembling. The puppies circled them, yipping and climbing over his legs as he laughed through tears. Around them, the staff paused to watch, smiling, some even wiping their own eyes. Later that day, as the adoption papers were signed, Rexa officially became part of Mark's family. The news spread quickly through the precinct. A retired K-9 and the officer who saved her, reunited by fate. That night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark sat on his porch, Rexa lying at his feet, her pups asleep beside her. He looked down, his hand resting on her head. "You saved them," he whispered, "and you saved me." Rexa looked up, her eyes shining in the fading light. In that moment, both man and dog knew. They had found home.